The blood moon hung low in the October sky, casting an ominous crimson glow over the ancient clearing where generations of Thornwald alphas had conducted their most sacred rituals. Alaric Thornwald stood motionless at the edge of the stone circle, his broad shoulders rigid beneath his ceremonial leather vest. The wind carried the scent of pine and sage, mingling with the tension that radiated from the gathered pack members. 40 pairs of eyes watched in reverent silence as the alpha who had led them through countless battles and 5 years of unprecedented prosperity prepared to sever his mate bond. Alaric's silver eyes, reflecting the blood moon's glow, remained fixed on the lone figure at the center of the circle. Alara Stone, his mate and Luna for the past 5 years, stood with quiet dignity beside the ritual table where the divorce parchment awaited her signature. Her chestnut hair fell in waves down her back, the same rich color it had been the day he had first seen her, bloodied but defiant, standing over the body of an enemy wolf who'd attempted to ambush him during the territorial wars. Even now, labeled as an Omega and facing public humiliation, she carried herself with the bearing of a warrior. The memories of their first meeting threatened to overwhelm him. Alara had been a military specialist then, part of a rare human unit aware of supernatural threats. She'd saved his life without hesitation, despite being taught that all werewolves were dangerous. In the aftermath, their connection had been immediate and undeniable. Within months, she had accepted the bite, joined his pack, and become his Luna. 5 years. 5 years of trying for an heir. 5 years of whispers growing louder with each passing moon. 5 years until the Council of Elders had finally delivered their ultimatum: replace the barren Luna or face a challenge for leadership. Elder Thorn Blackwell's gravelly voice broke the silence. The blood moon waits for no one, Omega. The title, once whispered with reverence when Alara had been Luna, now dripped with contempt from the elder's lips. Sign the parchment and be gone from these lands before dawn. Alaric suppressed a growl at the elder's tone. Though he had agreed to this ceremony under pressure from the council, hearing Alara addressed with such disrespect stirred something primal within him. Only his decades of discipline kept his wolf from surging forward. Alara's eyes, amber with flecks of gold that caught the moonlight, met his across the clearing. Where is my mate? Her voice emerged steadier than expected. If Alaric wishes to cast me aside, he should have the courage to look me in the eyes while doing so. A ripple of murmurs passed through the gathered wolves. Thorn's weathered face remained impassive. The Alpha has more pressing matters than watching an Omega weep over what was never truly hers. More pressing matters, Alara repeated softly, her gaze drifting toward the pack house where Alaric's new chosen waited. Lilith, beautiful and mysteriously pregnant with what the pack already celebrated as the future Alpha heir. The thought sent a fresh wave of pain through Alaric's chest. 5 years of trying to conceive with Alara, of monthly disappointments and whispers about her barrenness. And he had somehow managed to impregnate this newcomer within months of her arrival. It felt wrong. It had felt wrong from the beginning, but the pressure from the elders, the expectations of the pack, and the appearance of Lilith with her mysterious allure and promises of strong offspring had clouded his judgment. Now, watching Alara stand alone in the ritual circle, he felt the weight of his betrayal. You promised me forever, Alara whispered, not to Elder Thorn, but to the moon above. He swore by your light that our bond was unbreakable. And yet, came Alaric's deep voice as he stepped into the clearing, unable to maintain his distance any longer. Here we are. Alara turned, her heart both rising and falling at the sight of him. Even now, despite everything, the pull between them remained. Alaric Thornwald stood tall in the moonlight, his dark hair swept back, silver eyes gleaming with the power of his wolf. The scar that ran from his temple to his cheek, earned in the challenge that had made him Alpha, seemed to glow silver under the blood moon. You said you'd be too busy to attend, Elder Thorn stated, clearly surprised by the Alpha's presence. Alaric's gaze never left Alara's face. I changed my mind. Some endings deserve to be witnessed. The words cut deeper than any claw. Alara straightened her spine, refusing to crumble before him or the watching pack. Is that what I am to you now, Alaric? An ending? Something flickered in his eyes. Regret, perhaps, or merely annoyance. You know the laws, Alara. An Alpha needs an heir. And I couldn't give you one. The admission burned her throat. So you found someone who could. "It's not personal," he said, though the lie hung between them like poison. "It's for the pack." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "Nothing is more personal than breaking a mate bond, Alaric. Nothing." The gathered wolves shifted uncomfortably. Breaking a mate bond was considered sacred and final, especially under a blood moon. Such divorces were rare and painful, physically and spiritually. "Sign the document," Alaric commanded, his alpha voice resonating with power. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Alara felt the compulsion of his command, but it washed over her, strangely, like water over stone rather than the usual crushing weight. Something had changed within her, something the elders had missed. "As you wish, Alpha." She dipped the ritual quill into the small bowl of mixed ash and blood, her blood taken earlier by Elder Thorn for the ceremony. The black-red mixture glistened in the moonlight as she brought the quill to the parchment. But before signing, she looked up at Alaric one last time. "Do you remember what my grandmother told you the day we mated? That my bloodline carries secrets older than your pack was founding?" Alaric frowned. "Your grandmother was a senile old woman who claimed to be descended from the first wolves. Fairy tales and nothing more." Alara smiled then, a cold expression that didn't reach her eyes. "Perhaps, but fairy tales often contain warnings, don't they?" With that, she signed her name with swift, deliberate strokes. The moment the quill left the parchment, a sharp pain lanced through her chest, radiating outward as the mate bond began to dissolve. Gasping, she clutched at her heart, feeling as though molten silver coursed through her veins. Across from her, Alaric doubled over, experiencing the same severance. Their eyes met through the haze of agony, and for one brief moment, Ilara thought she saw genuine loss in his gaze. Then it was done. But as the last thread of their bond snapped, something unexpected happened. The ground beneath the ritual circle trembled. Wind whipped through the clearing, extinguishing several of the ceremonial torches. The blood moon above seemed to pulse, bathing Alara in its crimson light. For a heartbeat, her eyes shifted from their normal amber to a brilliant, glowing red. Several wolves gasped, backing away. Even Elder Thorn took a step back. Alaric, still recovering from the pain of the severed bond, stared at her with shock and something else, recognition. As if he were seeing something in her that he'd always suspected but never confirmed. Just as quickly as it had come, the strange phenomenon passed. The wind settled, the ground stilled. Alara's eyes returned to their normal shade, but something had irrevocably changed. She could feel it in her bones, in the suddenly heightened awareness of her surroundings, in the way the wolves around her shifted nervously. "It is done," Elder Thorn declared, rolling up the parchment with shaking hands. "You are no longer Luna of the Thornwald Pack. You have until dawn to leave our territories." Alara nodded once, her expression unreadable. "So be it." She turned to go, but paused beside Alaric. In a voice only he could hear, she whispered, "What's coming cannot be stopped by breaking our bond. It may have only hastened it. Remember that when your new mate's true nature is revealed." Before he could respond, she walked away, head high despite the whispers that followed her. Alaric watched her leave, a strange sense of foreboding settling in his chest. For the first time in decades, his wolf whined with uncertainty. Behind him, Elder Thorn approached, an unusual reaction to the severing. "Perhaps we should increase patrols tonight." "No," Alaric's response was immediate and firm. "Let her go in peace. She has that right, at least." As he watched Alara's figure disappear into the forest, Alaric couldn't shake the feeling that he had just made a terrible mistake, one that would have consequences far beyond a broken heart and damaged pride. The old wooden cabin stood nestled among ancient willow trees, almost hidden by the mist rising from Crimson Valley. Alara Stone approached slowly, each step stirring memories of childhood summers spent here with her grandmother. The Stone family retreat had stood abandoned since the old woman's death 7 years ago, just before Alara had met Alaric. Autumn leaves crunched beneath her boots as she climbed the weathered porch steps. The key, which she'd kept on a chain around her neck alongside her mate pendant, turned easily in the lock despite years of disuse. The door swung open with a groan, revealing a time capsule of her family's past. Dust motes danced in the beams of early morning light filtering through the windows. The main room appeared exactly as she remembered, a stone fireplace dominating one wall, handcrafted furniture arranged in a semicircle, and her grandmother's rocking chair positioned to catch both the warmth of the fire and the view through the front windows. Alara dropped her small bag of belongings by the door. After the ritual, she had returned to the pack house only long enough to collect a few essential items. Most of her possessions she'd left behind. They belonged to a life that was no longer hers. As she moved through the cabin, trailing her fingers over familiar surfaces, she became aware of a strange sensation. The severed mate bond had left a hollow ache in her chest, but beneath that emptiness, something else pulsed. Something warm and ancient, like embers long banked suddenly stirring to life. The pendant at her neck, no longer the symbol of her position as Luna, but a simple stone on a leather cord, felt unusually warm against her skin. She pulled it out, studying the smooth red stone with its strange swirling patterns. Her grandmother had given it to her on her 18th birthday, claiming it was a family heirloom that always returned to the women of their bloodline. "I've been waiting for you, Alara." The voice from the shadows of the kitchen doorway startled her so badly she nearly shifted on instinct. A tall, elderly man with a shock of white hair and alert blue eyes stepped into the light. Despite his advanced age, he moved with the fluid grace of a wolf, his back straight, his gaze sharp. "Who are you?" Alara demanded, her wolf rising close to the surface, ready to defend herself. "How did you get in here?" The old man smiled, revealing surprisingly strong white teeth. "Your grandmother gave me a key many years ago. I'm Silas Greyborn. I was an advisor to your grandmother, and before that, to her mother." Alara remained tense, evaluating the stranger. He carried the scent of wolf, but also something else, herbs and old books, and something elemental she couldn't quite identify. "My grandmother never mentioned you." Aurora was cautious about what she shared, especially after you met your mate. Silas moved to the fireplace, kneeling with surprising agility to arrange logs and kindling. She knew the Thornwall pack would be listening. "You knew I'd come here today." It wasn't a question, Silas nodded, striking a match. "I've been watching over you from a distance since Aurora passed, waiting for this day." The fire caught quickly, flames dancing to life. "The day your true nature would begin to awaken." Alara crossed her arms, wariness mingling with curiosity. "What do you know about my nature?" "More than the Thornwalds ever did." Silas stood, dusting off his hands. "More than you do yourself, though you've felt it stirring all your life, haven't you? That sense that you were meant for something beyond being someone's mate, the dreams of running with a pack of female wolves under a crimson moon." Alara stiffened. She'd never told anyone about those dreams, not even Alaric. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because they aren't dreams, Alara. They're memories, not yours, but your bloodlines. The women of the Stone family, originally the Crimson Shield clan, carry the memories of their ancestors in their blood." Silas gestured to the pendant around her neck. "And that stone you wear has been absorbing your experiences, your emotions, your power, preparing for the day you'd need it." Alara's hand closed around the pendant, protectively. "You're not making any sense. My grandmother was eccentric, but she never spoke of any Crimson Shield clan." "Of course she didn't." Silas moved to the large bookshelf that covered one wall, running his fingers along the spines until he found what he sought. "Aurora placed a protection spell on you when you were born, one that suppressed your true nature to keep you safe. The stronger spell was placed when you met Alaric Thornwald. She knew what would happen if the heir of the Crimson Shield bloodline mated with the alpha of the Thornwald pack." He pulled out a leather-bound volume, its cover worn with age. "The mate bond helped maintain the suppression spell. When it was severed last night, the spell began to unravel." He held the book out to her. "This will explain better than I can." Hesitantly, Alara accepted the book. As her fingers touched the ancient leather, the pendant at her neck pulsed with warmth. Opening the cover, she found herself looking at a family tree, the names written in a flowing script. At the very top was a name she didn't recognize. Seraphina Crimson, first Alpha of the Shield. "Alpha?" she whispered, tracing the line down through generations of women. There, near the bottom, was her grandmother's name, and below it, her mother's, and finally her own. "The Crimson Shield clan was one of the original werewolf bloodlines," Silas explained, watching her closely. "Unlike most packs, which followed patrilineal succession, The Crimson Shield clan passed leadership through the female line. They were renowned for their unique abilities, not just strength and speed, but a spiritual connection to the elements and a protective magic that earned them their name. Alara looked up from the book, skepticism warring with the undeniable resonance she felt with what he was saying. If this is true, why has no one ever heard of them? Why aren't they mentioned in werewolf history? They are, just not by name. The warrior women of the North mentioned in old tales, the flame-eyed guardians in ancient texts, all references to your ancestors. Silas moved to the center of the main room and knelt, pulling back the large woven rug to reveal a trap door set into the wooden floor. But the true history was deliberately obscured after the Great War with the Shadow Realm nearly 1,000 years ago. He lifted the trapdoor, revealing a set of stairs descending into darkness. Come, there's something you need to see. Against her better judgment, Alara followed Silas down the narrow staircase. The air grew cooler as they descended, carrying the scent of old paper and metal. At the bottom, Silas touched something on the wall, and soft golden light bloomed throughout the hidden chamber. Alara gasped. The basement was a vast room lined with bookshelves, display cases, and weapons racks. Maps covered one wall, ancient and yellowed but meticulously preserved. In glass cases rested artifacts, ceremonial daggers, scrolls, and jewelry similar to her pendant. But what drew her eye was the central display, a shield unlike any she'd seen before. Not metal or wood, but what appeared to be crystallized energy, glowing with a faint red light. The Crimson Shield, Silas said reverently, not the original, that was sacrificed to seal the veil after the Great War, but a replica created by your great-great-grandmother. Even as a copy, it contains considerable power. Alara approached the shield slowly, drawn by its faint pulsing glow. As she neared, the pendant at her neck grew warmer, and the shield's glow intensified in response. It recognizes you, Silas observed quietly. The blood calls to blood. Alara reached out, her fingertips hovering just above the shield's surface. What is the Shadow Realm? What is the veil you mentioned? Silas moved to another display case, this one containing what appeared to be a three-dimensional map or model. Our world is not the only one that exists. There are others separated from ours by a metaphysical barrier we call the veil. The Shadow Realm is one such world, home to entities of darkness that have sought entry to our realm for millennia. He gestured to the model, which showed two spheres connected by thin threads. The veil is thinnest during certain celestial events, blood moons, eclipses, solstices. During such times, entities from the Shadow Realm attempt to cross over. For centuries, the Crimson Shield clan were the guardians of the veil, using their unique abilities to prevent incursions. Alara withdrew her hand from the shield, trying to process what she was hearing. And my grandmother was one of these guardians? The last recognized alpha of the clan, Silas confirmed. After the territorial wars decimated werewolf populations and scattered the remaining Crimson Shield wolves, Aurora chose to hide rather than rebuild. She believed the threat from the Shadow Realm had diminished enough that constant vigilance was no longer necessary. He sighed heavily. She was wrong. The shadows have been gathering strength for decades. Small incursions have been occurring with increasing frequency. But the real threat is Abraxas, the Shadow Lord, who nearly succeeded in breaching the veil during the Great War. Alara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the basement's temperature. And you think this Abraxas is active again? I know he is. Silas's expression darkened. The signs are unmistakable to those who know to look for them. Unnatural darkness. Animals behaving strangely. Dreams of shadow and flame. And most telling of all, the appearance of a vessel. A vessel? A being created or possessed by Abraxas to serve as his anchor in our world, typically taking female form to exploit the protective instincts of male werewolves. Silas fixed Alara with a meaningful stare. A woman who appears suddenly, with no verifiable past, who exerts an unexplainable attraction on powerful males, who conceives impossibly quickly. The realization hit Alara like a physical blow. Lilith, Silas nodded grimly. I believe so. The timing is too perfect, appearing just as pressure mounted on Alaric to produce an heir, offering exactly what he needed most. But why Alaric specifically? Why the Thornwall pack? Silas moved to one of the bookshelves, selecting another volume. because of an ancient prophecy and because of who you both are. He opened the book to a marked page and handed it to her. Read this. The text was in an old form of Latin, but Alara had studied classical languages during her military training. She translated aloud. When blood of shield and blood of thorn unite, the veil shall strengthen or tear asunder. The child of two alphas shall either guard the gate or become it. She looked up, stunned. Two alphas? But I'm not. You are, Silas interrupted firmly, by blood and birthright, if not yet by awakened power. And Alaric is not just any alpha. The Thornwald line descends directly from the warriors who fought alongside the Crimson Shield clan in the Great War. Understanding dawned on Alara, cold and terrible. The spell my grandmother placed on me, it wasn't just to hide my nature, was it? It was to prevent conception between Alaric and me. Yes, Aurora knew that a child born of your union could fulfill the prophecy. She couldn't be certain which way it would go, whether such a child would become the Vale's greatest defender or its destruction. She chose caution. Alara sank onto a nearby chair, the implications overwhelming her. And now Lilith, Abraxas, is carrying Alaric's child. Not just any child, Silas said gravely. A hybrid, half-shadow entity, half-werewolf with the Thornwald alpha lineage. The perfect key to permanently breach the veil. We have to warn Alaric. Alara stood abruptly. Silas shook his head. He wouldn't believe us. Not yet. Abraxas's influence over him is too strong, especially through the pregnancy. We need proof, and you need training. Your powers are only beginning to awaken. As if to emphasize his point, the pendant at Alara's neck pulsed with renewed warmth. She looked down to see it glowing with the same crimson light as the shield. How much time do we have? The child will be born on the next blood moon, approximately 1 lunar cycle from now. Silas moved to a trunk in the corner and opened it, revealing training gear, practice weapons, athletic clothes, and notebooks. We have 1 month to awaken your full abilities, gather allies, and prepare to prevent the ritual that will tear open the veil. Alara picked up one of the practice swords, testing its weight. 5 years as a military specialist before meeting Alaric had given her combat skills, and 5 years as Luna had taught her pack politics. But this was something else entirely. If I truly am what you say, the heir to the Crimson Shield line, why didn't I feel it before? Why now? The mate bond with Alaric reinforced your grandmother's suppression spell. When it broke, your true nature began reasserting itself. Silas approached her, his expression solemn. But there's something else you should know. The spell didn't just suppress your alpha nature. It also prevented conception between you and Alaric. Alara stared at him, the implications hitting her like a physical blow. Are you saying I'm not barren? That I could have had children if not for my grandmother's spell? You were never barren, Alara. Aurora made a choice to prevent what she feared might be a catastrophic fulfillment of prophecy. Silas's eyes held compassion, but no apology. She did what she believed was necessary to protect not just you, but the world. Anger flashed through Alara, hot and sudden. 5 years of humiliation, of whispers behind her back, of watching Alaric's disappointment grow with each passing moon. All because of a choice made without her knowledge or consent. She had no right, Alara whispered fiercely. No right to make that decision for me. Perhaps not, Silas acknowledged. But consider the alternative. If you had conceived with Alaric, that child would now be the focus of Abraxas's attention. The Shadow Lord would steep at nothing to corrupt or control a child of your bloodlines. The thought sent a chill down Alara's spine, tempering her anger. As painful as the truth was, she couldn't deny the logic. A child, her child, used as a pawn by a dark entity was a fate worse than childlessness. A sudden noise from upstairs interrupted their conversation. Footsteps on the porch, then a hesitant knock at the door. Alara and Silas exchanged a glance. They weren't expecting anyone, and the cabin's location wasn't widely known. Stay here, Silas whispered, withdrawing a small vial from his pocket. Wolfsbane essence. It will mask your scent temporarily if needed. Alara nodded, accepting the vial but also picking up one of the training daggers. Old military habits died hard. Silas ascended the stairs silently, closing the trapdoor behind him. Alara heard his footsteps cross the main room, Then the creak of the front door opening. Muffled voices followed, too low for her to distinguish words despite her enhanced hearing. After what felt like an eternity, the trapdoor reopened, and Silas called down, "It's safe, come up. We have a visitor you should meet." Wary but curious, Alara climbed the stairs. In the main room stood a woman she'd never seen before. Roughly 35 years old with striking platinum blonde hair and intelligent green eyes. The woman's stance was both defensive and exhausted, as though she'd been running for some time. "This is Raina Winters," Silas introduced. "Until yesterday, she was the pack healer for the Thornwald Wolves." "Was?" Alara questioned, studying the newcomer carefully. Raina met her gaze directly. "I left after what I discovered about Lilith and her pregnancy. No one would listen to me, not even Alaric. When I persisted, Elder Thorn ordered my execution for spreading malicious lies about the future heir." "Raina managed to escape," Silas explained. "She's been tracking rumors about the Stone family for months, suspecting a connection to what she was observing. When she heard about your divorce, she correctly guessed you might come here." Alara gestured for Raina to sit. The woman moved gingerly, and now Alara noticed the bandage peeking out from under her sleeve. "You're injured." "It's nothing serious. One of the younger pack members caught me as I was leaving. He was overzealous in his attempt to detain me." Raina settled into the offered chair with a grateful sigh. "I've treated worse." "What exactly did you discover about Lilith that was worth risking your life?" Alara asked, taking the seat across from her. Raina's expression darkened. "At first, just inconsistencies. Her medical history didn't align with her physical condition. The pregnancy progressed too rapidly. Then I noticed changes in those who spent time with her. Personality shifts, increased aggression, memory gaps." She leaned forward, lowering her voice despite the fact that they were alone in the cabin. "3 nights ago, I followed her into the forest. She was collecting herbs, nightshade, bloodroot, things no pregnant woman should handle. When she thought herself unobserved, her eyes changed." "Changed how?" Silas asked sharply. "They became completely black. Not just the iris, the entire eye. And she spoke in a language I've never heard before, though I'm fluent in 7. Raina shuddered at the memory. "But the worst part was what I found in her medical samples. The amniotic fluid surrounding the fetus. It's not natural. It contains elements I can't identify, compounds that shouldn't exist in a human or werewolf pregnancy." Alara and Silas exchanged a knowing look. "Shadow essence," Silas murmured. Raina nodded grimly. "Whatever she's carrying, it's not a normal child, and it's affecting the entire pack. The wolves are becoming more aggressive, more paranoid. Even Alaric seems changed, distant, easily manipulated by Lilith and Elder Thorn." "Abraxas is strengthening his hold," Silas said. "As the pregnancy progresses, his influence grows. By the time the child is born, the entire pack may be under his control." Alara stood and paced the small room, mind racing. "We need more information, and we need allies. If what you're both saying is true, stopping this will require more than just the 3 of us." "There are others," Silas confirmed. "Tattered members of the old Crimson Shield clan who went into hiding after the territorial wars. Former Thornwald wolves who left the pack during Thorn's rise to power as head elder. If we can reach them, convince them of the threat. And we need to understand exactly what Abraxas is planning," Raina added. "The ritual, the timing, the requirements. Knowledge is power." Alara paused by the window, looking out at the misty forest surrounding the cabin. Somewhere beyond those trees, Alaric was being manipulated by a shadow entity wearing human form, preparing to father a child that could destroy the world as they knew it. The man who had broken her heart was now potentially the linchpin in a supernatural disaster. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had been cast aside for being unable to provide an heir, only to discover that her failure had been protection against exactly the scenario now unfolding. "Silas mentioned training," she said, turning back to face them. "If I'm truly meant to be an alpha of the Crimson Shield line, I need to understand what that means. What abilities I have, how to use them." Silas nodded approvingly. "We'll begin at dawn. The awakening of a Crimson Shield alpha is not easy or painless, but we have no time for a gradual process." "And I can provide intelligence," Raina offered. "I still have contacts within the pack who trust me, who've noticed the strange changes but are too afraid to speak openly. For the first time since the divorce ritual, Alara felt a sense of purpose replacing the hollow ache in her chest. The mate bond was gone, but something older and perhaps more powerful was taking its place. A connection to her bloodline, to a legacy of protection and power. She touched the pendant at her neck, which had settled into a steady, warm pulse against her skin. Then we have a plan. Train, gather information, recruit allies. Her eyes hardened with determination. And when we're ready, we'll save Alaric and stop Abraxas from tearing open the veil. As the words left her mouth, the pendant flared with crimson light. For a brief moment, Alara's eyes shifted to the same glowing red they had shown during the divorce ritual. Reyna gasped, and even Silas looked momentarily startled. "It begins," the old advisor whispered. "The crimson shield rises again." Outside, as if in response, a lone wolf howled in the distance. And deeper in the forest, in the shadows between ancient trees, something darker than night stirred in anticipation. In the heart of Thornwald territory, Alaric stood alone on the balcony of the Alpha's quarters, staring at the waning moon. 3 days had passed since the divorce ritual, and the hollow ache where his mate bond had once pulsed showed no signs of diminishing. If anything, it felt larger, a void that nothing seemed to fill. Behind him in the large bed they'd once shared with Alara, Lilith slept soundly, one hand resting protectively over her swollen belly. The pregnancy progressed with unnatural speed. Another miracle, according to Elder Thorn. Another sign that Alaric had made the right decision in setting aside his barren mate for one who could provide what the pack needed most. Yet doubt gnawed at him, growing stronger each day. Strange dreams plagued his sleep. Shadows with gleaming eyes, whispers in languages he didn't recognize but somehow understood. And more disturbing still, gaps in his memory. Hours that disappeared, conversations he couldn't recall having. Something was wrong. He'd felt it from the moment Lilith had appeared at the pack's borders 3 months ago, seeking sanctuary. Her story had seemed plausible enough. A lone wolf fleeing a disbanded pack in the north. But her effect on him had been immediate and overwhelming. A compulsion that felt similar to, but distinctly different from what he'd experienced upon meeting Alara. With Alara, it had been a clear recognition, two pieces fitting perfectly together. With Lilith, it was more like drowning, a pull downward, irresistible but threatening. The departure of Reyna, their pack healer, troubled him deeply. The official story was that she had fled after spreading lies about Lilith and the pregnancy, but Alaric couldn't reconcile that with the Reyna he'd known for decades. Level-headed, dedicated, unfailingly honest. More concerning was his own reaction when Thorn had suggested executing her for treason. For a terrible moment he had agreed. Only later, alone in his study, had he come back to himself, horrified at his willingness to condemn a loyal pack member without trial. A soft noise from the bedroom interrupted his thoughts. Lilith stirred, her eyes opening to find him watching her. "Alaric," she murmured, her voice honeyed in the darkness. "Come back to bed. It's cold without you." He felt the familiar pull, the compulsion to obey, to please her. But tonight, with the divorce ritual still fresh in his mind, he found he could resist, just barely. "In a moment," he replied, turning back to the moon. "I need some air." Lilith's expression flickered with something that might have been annoyance, quickly masked by a gentle smile. "Don't stay up too late. The heir needs his father strong." His father. The words should have filled him with pride, with anticipation. Instead, they rang hollow, like words from a script he was expected to recite but didn't believe. When he was certain Lilith had drifted back to sleep, Alaric quietly descended to his study. Locking the door behind him, he retrieved a key hidden behind a loose stone in the fireplace. A key Alara had given him years ago, which he'd never used but also never discarded. It opened a hidden compartment in his desk, where she had stored what she called emergency measures, items from her military days she'd kept as last resorts. Among them was a small vial of clear liquid labeled simply Clarity. Alara had explained once that it was a compound developed for special forces operatives who might be subjected to mind-altering substances. It temporarily cleared external influences from the system, allowing the user a brief window of true mental autonomy. Without allowing himself to second-guess, Alaric uncorked the vial and downed its contents in a single swallow. The liquid burned going down, spreading fire through his veins. For several agonizing seconds, he could barely breathe, gripping the edge of his desk as the compound took effect. Then, like mist burning away in sudden sunlight, his mind cleared. The constant background pull he'd felt since Lilith's arrival disappeared, leaving his thoughts sharper and more focused than they'd been in months. In this moment of clarity, the pieces began to fall into place. Lilith's convenient arrival just as pressure mounted for an heir. Her instant connection with Elder Thorn, who had been most vocal about replacing Alara. The strange changes in pack behavior since her arrival, increased aggression, paranoia, an unusual fixation on the unborn child, and perhaps most telling, the words Alara had whispered to him after the divorce ritual. What's coming cannot be stopped by breaking our bond. It may have only hastened it. With sudden certainty, Alaric knew he needed to find Alara, not to reconcile, that bridge was burned, but because she had seen something he had missed, because despite everything she had tried to warn him. The effects of the clarity serum wouldn't last long, perhaps an hour at most. He needed to act quickly, before whatever influence Lilith exerted reasserted itself. Moving quietly through the sleeping pack house, Alaric made his way to the garage where the pack vehicles were kept. Taking his personal truck, less conspicuous than the Alpha's ceremonial vehicle, he drove out into the night, heading toward the one place he suspected Alara might have gone. The old Stone family cabin in Crimson Valley lay nearly 40 miles from Thornwald territory, across the neutral zone established after the territorial wars. As he drove, Alaric pieced together fragments of conversations with Alara, Lard over the years, mentions of summers spent there with her grandmother, stories of the old woman's strange habits and cryptic warnings. Aurora Stone had never approved of their mating. She had attended the ceremony with obvious reluctance, pulling Alaric aside afterward to deliver what he'd dismissed as the ramblings of a superstitious old woman. Some bloodlines were never meant to mix, Alpha Thornwald, not because they're incompatible, but because they're too powerful together. Watch over her, but know that what you've begun today may end in ways neither of you could imagine. At the time, he'd attributed her words to the typical protective concern of family. Now, with his mind temporarily free of whatever influence had been clouding it, he wondered if there had been more to her warning. Dawn was breaking as Alaric turned onto the narrow dirt road leading to the stone cabin. The serum's effects were beginning to fade, the mental clarity giving way to a pounding headache and the faint return of that pulling sensation at the edges of his consciousness. He had perhaps minutes before he would be back under Lilith's influence, even at this distance. Whatever he needed to say to Alara, it would have to be quick. As the cabin came into view through the morning mist, Alaric was surprised to see smoke rising from the chimney. So she was here. He parked the truck at a distance, approaching on foot through the dense forest surrounding the property. Old Alpha instincts took over, assessing the territory, noting escape routes, identifying potential threats. He was nearly at the clearing's edge when a scent stopped him cold. Not just Alara's familiar paint and vanilla essence, but others. One he recognized as Reyna, his missing pack healer. Another, older male werewolf, unknown to him. And beneath it all, a strange metallic tang that reminded him of the blood moon. Stepping into the open, Alaric was immediately spotted by a figure on the cabin's porch. The unknown male, elderly, but holding himself with the confidence of a warrior. "Alaric Thornwald," the old man called, neither friendly nor hostile. "We've been expecting you." Before Alaric could respond, the cabin door opened and Alara emerged. The sight of her hit him like a physical blow. In just 3 days, she had changed. She stood taller, her movements more fluid and confident. The pendant around her neck, not the mate pendant he'd given her, but an older one she'd always worn beneath her clothes, glowed faintly with a crimson light. But it was her eyes that truly shocked him. No longer just amber, they now held flecks of red that caught the morning light like embers. "Alaric," she acknowledged, her voice steady. "The clarity serum worked, I see." He stiffened in surprise. "You knew I'd use it?" "I hoped." She descended the porch steps, approaching him with caution, but not fear. "But we don't have much time before its effects fade completely. Why are you here?" "Something's wrong with Lilith," he stated bluntly. "With the pregnancy, with the pack, with me. I need to understand what's happening. Alara exchanged a glance with the old man, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Come inside, she said. There's much to explain, and as you said, time is short. As he followed her into the cabin, Alaric noticed Reyna standing in the kitchen doorway, watching him warily. Her right arm was bandaged, and she held herself as though favoring injured ribs. Reyna, he acknowledged. Elder Thorn said you fled after spreading lies. Not lies, Alpha, she responded quietly. Truths no one was ready to hear. Truths about what, or who, Lilith really is. The old man closed the door behind them, introducing himself as Silas Greyborn, former advisor to Alara's grandmother. Together, the three of them laid out what they had discovered. About Abraxas, about the Shadow Realm, about the prophecy concerning bloodlines of Shield and Thorn. With each revelation, pieces fell into place in Alaric's mind. The strange dreams, the personality changes among pack members, the unnatural speed of Lilith's pregnancy. The child she carries, Alara explained, isn't truly yours, or at least not only yours. It's a hybrid being, part werewolf with your alpha lineage, part shadow entity. Abraxas intends to use it as a gateway between worlds during the Blood Moon ritual. Why me, Alaric asked, the headache intensifying as the serum's effects continued to wane. Why my pack? Because of who you are, Silas explained. The Thornwald line descends from the warriors who fought alongside the Crimson Shield clan in the Great War against the Shadow Realm. Your bloodline carries power, different from Alara's, but complementary. Together they create either the strongest possible guardian for the Veil, or its destruction. And Alara and I couldn't conceive because my grandmother placed a suppression spell on me, Alara said, a hint of old pain in her voice. It both hid my true nature as heir to the Crimson Shield and prevented conception between us. She feared the prophecy, feared what our child might become if influenced by darkness. Alaric absorbed this, the implications staggering. So I cast you aside for nothing, for a lie. You cast me aside because something was influencing you, Alara corrected, though not unkindly. Braxis has been manipulating events for months, perhaps years, creating the perfect circumstances for his plan. A wave of dizziness hit Alaric suddenly, and he gripped the edge of the table to steady himself. The pulling sensation was returning with a vengeance, like hooks in his mind dragging him back toward Thornwald territory, toward Lilith. The serum is wearing off, Reyna observed, moving closer to examine him. His pupils are dilating. We don't have much time, Silas warned. Once the influence returns fully, he won't remember this conversation. Or worse, he'll report everything to Abraxas through Lilith. Alara knelt before Alaric, taking his hands in hers. The touch sent a shock through him, not the old mate bond, which was irrevocably broken, but something else, a recognition on a deeper level. Alaric, listen to me, she said urgently. When you return, you'll be under his influence again. But part of you, your wolf, your core self, will remember this moment. Hold on to it. Fight his control where you can. Watch for signs. Signs of what? He managed, each word becoming more difficult as the compulsion to return to Lilith grew stronger. Signs that were coming, Alara said, her eyes flashing fully red for a moment. Because we will come, Alaric. On the night before the blood moon, we'll come to stop the ritual and save your pack. Save you. Save the child if we can. He wanted to say more, to apologize, to explain, but the words wouldn't come. The last of the serum's effects faded, and with it, his mental clarity. The pull toward Lilith became overwhelming, a physical need to return to her side. He's gone, Silas observed as Alaric's expression changed, his eyes taking on a glazed quality. Alara stood, releasing his hands. Not gone, she corrected quietly. Just buried. But he heard us. That will have to be enough for now. As if in a trance, Alaric rose. I need to get back, he muttered. Lilith will be worried. Of course, Alara said, not attempting to stop him. Go safely, Alpha Thornwald. He left without another word, moving with mechanical precision back to his truck. As he drove away from the cabin, details of the conversation were already fading from his conscious mind, replaced by an urgent need to return to his pregnant mate. But deep within, beneath the layers of compulsion and manipulation, his wolf remembered, and watched, and waited. In the cabin, Alara stood at the window, watching until Alaric's truck disappeared from view. The pendant at her neck pulsed with steady crimson light, matching the rhythm of her heartbeat. "Do you think it worked?" Raina asked, coming to stand beside her. "Will any part of him remember?" "It has to," Alara replied quietly, "because we're going to need him when the time comes. Not just as a distraction, but as an ally." She turned from the window to face Silas and Raina, her eyes now permanently flecked with red, a visible sign of her awakening power. "We have work to do, a clan to rebuild, allies to gather, and powers to master." The old advisor nodded approvingly. "The next blood moon approaches, and with it, our one chance to prevent catastrophe." Ilara's hand closed around her pendant, feeling the power of generations of Crimson Shield Alphas flowing through it. The Omega who had signed divorce papers under the blood moon was gone. In her place stood something older, stronger, and infinitely more dangerous to the shadows gathering on the horizon. "Then we better get started," she said. "Abraxas wants a war between realms. Let's show him why the Crimson Shield was feared even by the darkness itself." As the sun rose fully over Crimson Valley, three figures began preparations for a battle that would determine the fate not just of two werewolf bloodlines, but of the barrier between worlds. And somewhere in the shadows, watching through eyes not his own, Abraxas sensed the awakening of an ancient power and smiled. Dawn broke over the Crimson Valley in ribbons of gold and amber. Alara Stone stood at the edge of the forest clearing, her body coiled with a new tension that seemed to hum beneath her skin. 3 weeks had passed since she'd discovered the truth about her bloodline, and each day had brought both revelation and challenge. Silas stood several yards away, his weathered hands gripping a staff of polished oak. Despite his 78 years, the old advisor moved with the fluid grace of a much younger wolf. The morning mist swirled around his ankles as he circled her, eyes alert and assessing. "Your grandmother completed this ritual when she was 16, he called, his voice carrying across the clearing. "She mastered it in 7 days." Ilara felt a familiar spark of irritation and pushed it aside. Silas had been using Aurora Stone's achievements to goad her into greater effort since they'd begun her training. It was a transparent tactic, but effective nonetheless. "My grandmother wasn't trying to cram decades of training into 3 weeks, she replied, rolling her shoulders to loosen the tension. The pendant at her neck pulsed with steady warmth against her skin, a constant reminder of the power awakening within her. "The blood moon will not wait for you to be ready," Silas countered, suddenly lunging forward with surprising speed. The staff whistled through the air toward her head. Alara sidestepped, but not quite fast enough. The wooden shaft caught her shoulder, sending her stumbling back. Pain blossomed where it struck, but it was already fading. Another change. Her body healed more quickly now, injuries vanishing within minutes instead of hours. "Focus," Silas commanded. "The pendant is not just a conduit for your power. It's a weapon, a shield, and a key. Feel its connection to every part of you." Alara closed her eyes, centering herself as she'd been taught. The world around her seemed to expand in her awareness. The rustle of leaves, the distant call of birds, the heartbeats of small animals hiding in the underbrush. And beneath it all, a steady pulse that matched the rhythm of the stone against her chest. When Silas attacked again, she was ready. Without opening her eyes, she sensed the staff's approach, felt the displacement of air. Her hands shot up, catching the wooden shaft inches from her face. In the same motion, her other hand reached for the pendant. As her fingers touched the crimson stone, it flared with light that rippled outward, forming a translucent shield of energy between her and Silas. The old man's weathered face broke into a rare smile. "Better, much better." From the edge of the clearing, Raina Winters watched with keen interest, her healer's eye noting every subtle change in Alara's movements and reactions. The former pack healer had become an invaluable ally, her knowledge of werewolf physiology helping Alara understand and adapt to her rapidly changing body. "The shield is stronger today," Raina observed as Alara allowed the energy to dissipate. "How does it feel?" "Less like I'm pushing against a wall," Alara admitted, rubbing her temples. "More like opening a door that was always there." "Your grandmother's suppression spell is almost completely unraveled," Silas explained, leaning on his staff. "Your true nature is emerging, but the awakening is incomplete." Alara nodded, feeling the truth of his words in her bones. The changes had been coming in waves, enhanced strength and speed, heightened senses. the ability to manifest the crimson shield for brief periods. But something remained just beyond her reach, a final threshold she couldn't seem to cross. The ritual of awakening requires blood of your line, Silas continued, gesturing for them to follow him back to the cabin. Traditionally, this would be passed from mother to daughter, or grandmother to granddaughter. Without Aurora, we improvise, Alara finished for him, her voice resolute. She'd grown accustomed to Silas's roundabout way of approaching difficult subjects. Tell me what we need. Inside the cabin, Raina had prepared a simple breakfast of eggs, fruit, and strong black coffee. As they ate, Silas spread an ancient map across the wooden table, its edges frayed and yellowed with age. Your grandmother's resting place, he said, pointing to a location marked with a faded red symbol, in the heart of what was once Crimson Shield territory, before the territorial wars. The ritual must be performed there, using soil from her grave and the bloodstone from her ceremonial dagger. Alara studied the map, calculating the distance. That's at least a day's journey from here, deeper into neutral territory. And dangerously close to the southern border of Thornwald land, Raina added, her expression concerned. Thorn has doubled patrols since your departure. There are rumors he's preparing for something big. The Council of Elders grows increasingly paranoid, Silas agreed. Our sources say Lilith has them convinced that you're gathering forces to challenge Alaric's leadership. Ilara snorted. Hardly. I have better things to do than overthrow my ex-husband. Like prevent an ancient shadow entity from tearing open the veil between worlds, Raina said dryly, refilling Alara's coffee cup. Just a typical month for the heir of the Crimson Shield. The moment of levity was welcome but brief. Silas rolled the map carefully, his expression grave. We should leave at nightfall. The journey is perilous but necessary. Without completing the awakening ritual, you won't have the strength to face Abraxas when the blood moon rises. Alara nodded, her mind already cataloging what they would need for the journey. But as she rose to prepare, the distant sound of an approaching vehicle caught her attention. Her enhanced hearing recognized the particular rumble of an engine. Not just any vehicle, but a motorcycle, one she'd heard before. Raina moved to the window, peering through the curtains. A rider, female, coming fast. Silas reached for his walking stick, which Alara now knew concealed a blade of silver and iron. Friend or foe? Alara joined Raina at the window, watching as the motorcycle skidded to a stop in the clearing before the cabin. The rider dismounted in a fluid motion, removing her helmet to reveal short, spiky hair dyed a vibrant blue. Despite the hair color, Alara recognized her immediately. Freya, she breathed, a mixture of surprise and wariness coloring her voice. Alaric's younger sister. Silas moved to block the door, his body tensing. The one who sided with the elders during your divorce? The very same, Alara confirmed, watching as Freya approached the cabin with purposeful strides. Though I never understood why. We were close once. Before Silas could object, Alara opened the door, stepping onto the porch to meet her former sister-in-law. Freya Thornwald stopped at the bottom of the steps, her leather jacket dusty from the road, her amber eyes, so like Alaric's, assessing Alara with a mixture of wariness and relief. You look different, Freya said by way of greeting. It suits you. What are you doing here, Freya? Alara asked, not bothering with pleasantries. Last I checked, you were firmly in your brother's corner. A shadow crossed Freya's face. My brother isn't himself, hasn't been for months. I thought it was grief over your separation at first, or the pressure from the elders. But it's something else. She glanced at Silas and Raina, who had emerged from the cabin. Something is wrong with Lilith, with the pregnancy. The pack is changing, becoming more aggressive, paranoid. Even Alaric seems possessed. Alara exchanged glances with Silas. You've come to the right place, but for reasons you probably don't understand yet. Try me, Freya challenged, climbing the steps to stand eye to eye with Alara. I've seen things in the past week that defy explanation. Shadow creatures moving through the forest at night. Pack members with black eyes, speaking in languages no one recognizes. And Lilith? She shuddered visibly. 2 nights ago, I saw her in the garden alone. Her stomach was moving. Not like a normal pregnancy. Something inside her was shifting, changing shape. Raina stepped forward. You should come inside. What you're describing matches what I observed, for I was forced to flee. Freya hesitated, her gaze lingering on Alara's pendant, which pulsed with a faint crimson light even in the daylight. What's happening to you? Your scent has changed. You feel powerful. That's a long story, Alara replied, gesturing toward the cabin door. One that involves your brother, an ancient shadow entity, and a prophecy about the end of the world. How's your tolerance for the unbelievable? Freya's lips curved in a grim smile. After what I've witnessed this week, test me. Inside, over fresh coffee, Silas and Alara took turns explaining the situation. Alara's true heritage as heir to the Crimson Shield line, Aurora's suppression spell, Abraxas's plan to use Lilith as a vessel for creating a hybrid child that would breach the veil. Freya listened without interruption, her expression growing more troubled with each revelation. So my brother's child isn't really his child, she said finally, her voice hollow. It's some kind of gateway for a shadow monster. Not entirely, Reyna clarified. The child is being formed from Alaric's genetic material, but it's being corrupted by Abraxas's essence. It will be born part werewolf, part shadow entity, a being that exists simultaneously in both realms. And this ritual on the blood moon will permanently tear open the veil between our world and the shadow realm, Silas confirmed, allowing Abraxas and his kind free passage. Freya sat back, running a hand through her blue spikes. That explains the preparations Thorn has been making. He's converted the central chamber of the pack house into some kind of ritual space. Black candles, strange symbols painted on the floor. He's under Abraxas's influence, Alara said. Probably has been since before Lilith arrived. The Shadow Lord needed allies within the pack, wolves in positions of power who could help manipulate events. Thorn has always been power-hungry and traditional to a fault, Freya agreed. Easy prey for something offering greater strength and a return to the old ways of werewolf dominance. Silas studied the younger Thornwald, his ancient eyes penetrating. Why have you come to us? What made you seek out Alara specifically? Freya met his gaze unflinchingly. 2 reasons. First, I found this in Alaric's study. She reached into her jacket and withdrew a small vial of clear liquid, labeled simply Clarity in Alara's handwriting. It was hidden in a secret compartment in his desk. The seal was broken, and when I asked him about it, he had no memory of taking it. Alara took the empty vial, turning it over in her hands. He used it. The serum temporarily clears external influences from the mind. I left it for emergencies when I was still in the military, dealing with potential mind control threats. It would have given him a brief window of lucidity, Reyna mused. Freedom from Abraxas's manipulation. Which explains the second reason I'm here, Freya continued, her expression softening. 3 nights ago, Alaric came to my quarters after midnight. He seemed different, clear-headed, focused. He gave me this. She produced a folded piece of paper from her pocket and handed it to Alara. He said if anything happened to him, I should find you and give you this message. Then he made me promise to leave the pack for a few days, to go visit our cousins in the Eastern Territories. By morning, he had no memory of our conversation. Alara unfolded the paper with careful fingers. The handwriting was unmistakably Alaric's, bold, precise strokes that brought a pang of unexpected longing. The message was brief. The child comes with the blood moon. The veil thins. Beneath the roots of the ancient oak, where we first met, what was severed may yet shield. The clarity serum, Alara murmured. It gave him enough awareness to leave a message he knew his controlled self wouldn't remember. The ancient oak, Reyna repeated thoughtfully. That's on the border between Thornwall territory and the neutral zone, isn't it? Alara nodded, memories flooding back. It's where we first met during the territorial wars. I was scouting with my military unit when we encountered an ambush. Alaric had been separated from his pack, wounded. We fought off the attackers together. There's something buried there, Freya guessed. Something he wanted you to find. And what was severed may yet shield, Silas read aloud, his brow furrowing. A reference to your broken mate bond, perhaps, or something else that was cut or divided. Alara folded the note carefully, tucking it into her pocket. There's only one way to find out, but first we need to complete the awakening ritual. Without my full powers, I won't be strong enough to face whatever's coming. Silas nodded in agreement. The journey to Aurora's resting place is perilous enough. We should leave tonight as planned. I'll go with you, Freya offered, her expression determined. I know the border territories better than anyone, and I can get you past Thornwall patrols if necessary. Alara studied her former sister-in-law, searching for any sign of deception. Finding none, she extended her hand. Welcome to the Resistance, Freya Thornwald. As their hands clasped, Alara's pendant flared briefly with crimson light, as if in approval of their alliance. The four of them spent the remainder of the day preparing for the journey, gathering supplies, studying maps, and in Alara's case, continuing to practice controlling her awakening abilities. Night fell with unusual swiftness, clouds rolling in to obscure the waxing moon. As they loaded their gear into Raina's sturdy SUV, Alara felt a strange sensation, a pulling at the edges of her consciousness, like distant voices calling her name. Do you feel that? She asked, pausing with her bag half loaded. Silas looked up sharply. What do you sense? Others, Alara said slowly, turning toward the forest. Wolves, but not Thornwall pack. Different. Familiar somehow, though I've never met them. The old advisor's eyes widen. The call. You're beginning to sense other Crimson Shield descendants. That's not possible, Alara argued. You said the clan was scattered, decimated by the territorial wars. Scattered, yes. Decimated, no, Silas corrected. Many went into hiding, changing their names, joining other packs, or living as lone wolves. But blood calls to blood, especially when an alpha begins to awaken. As if in confirmation of his words, shapes began to emerge from the forest edge. Wolves in various forms, some fully shifted with fur gleaming in the darkness, others in human form moving with preternatural grace. They approached cautiously, forming a loose semicircle at the clearing's edge. Raina tensed, her hand moving instinctively toward the knife at her belt, but Freya laid a restraining hand on her arm. They're not hostile, she murmured. Look at their posture. Indeed, the newcomers maintained respectful distances, heads slightly bowed in a traditional gesture of greeting rather than challenge. From their midst, an older woman stepped forward, silver-haired, with the same amber gold eyes that Alara had inherited from her mother's side. We felt the awakening, the woman said, her voice carrying clearly across the clearing. The call of Crimson Shield blood. We have come to offer our allegiance, as our ancestors did to yours. Alara moved forward slowly, the pendant at her neck growing warmer with each step. Who are you? I am Celine Rivers, the woman replied. Once Celine Stone, cousin to your grandmother Aurora. Behind me stand 37 descendants of the original Crimson Shield clan, drawn from across the continent by the pull of your awakening. Silas stepped up beside Alara, his expression a mixture of shock and elation. I never imagined so many had survived. We kept to the shadows, Celine explained, her gaze shifting momentarily to Silas. As instructed by the last alpha, until the air should call us home. Her attention returned to Alara. And now you have, though perhaps not intentionally. The realization struck Alara with sudden clarity. The strange dreams she'd been having, the sense of reaching out across vast distances. Her awakening powers hadn't just been changing her, they had been broadcasting to others of her bloodline, drawing them home like a beacon. The blood moon approaches, Celine continued, gesturing to the others behind her. We bring news from territories far and wide. The shadows grow bolder. Incursions increase. Strange events multiply. The veil thins. We were just preparing to journey to Aurora's resting place, Alara explained, still trying to process the unexpected arrival of so many allies. To complete the awakening ritual. Celine smiled, the expression transforming her severe features. Then our timing is fortunate. We will accompany you, provide protection. The heir must reach the sacred ground. As introductions were made and plans adjusted to accommodate the new allies, Alara found herself drawn to Celine, sensing a wealth of knowledge and experience in the older woman. As the others prepared for departure, they walked a short distance from the group, speaking in low voices. You knew my grandmother well? Alara asked. We were raised together, Celine confirmed, trained together, fought together during the last major incursion nearly 50 years ago. Aurora was the stronger of us, always destined to be alpha. I was her second, her blade. Her blade? In the old structure of the clan, the alpha was supported by 4 key positions: the blade, the shield, the heart, and the voice. Together they formed the Alpha's inner circle, each with specific duties and powers. Celine studied Alara thoughtfully. You will need to rebuild this structure if you are to effectively lead. Alara shook her head. I'm not looking to lead a clan. I just want to stop Abraxas from breaking through the veil and protect the innocent lives at stake. The two are not separate goals, Celine countered gently. The Crimson Shield clan has always been the primary defense against shadow incursions. It is our purpose, our calling. And like it or not, the blood of leadership runs in your veins. Before Alara could respond, a commotion arose from the edge of the clearing. One of the newly arrived wolves, a young man with russet hair, had shifted back to human form and was gesturing urgently toward the forest. Patrol approaching, he called, his voice low but carrying. Thornwalled wolves, heavily armed, at least a dozen, moving in formation. Freya cursed, moving quickly to join them. Thorn must have tracked me. I was careful, but... No time for blame, Alara interrupted, her mind racing. How long do we have? Minutes, the young scout replied. They're moving fast, with purpose. Silas appeared at Alara's side, his expression grim. We cannot engage them here. Too many innocents could be caught in the crossfire if things escalate. Alara nodded in agreement, decision crystallizing. Celine, take half our people and head for the sacred ground. Reyna goes with you. She knows the ritual requirements. Silas, Freya, and I will take the rest and create a diversion. Lead the patrol away from your route. A sound strategy, Celine approved, but risky for you. Without completing the awakening, your powers remain limited. Limited but growing, Alara countered, touching the pendant at her neck. And I have something the Thornwall wolves don't expect. Allies of my own. As the group quickly divided according to Alara's instructions, she felt a strange calm settle over her. 3 weeks ago, she had been cast out, divorced, alone. Now she stood at the center of a gathering force, her true heritage awakening within her, her purpose clarifying with each passing hour. The scout returned, breathing hard. They've spotted our vehicles. They're approaching the cabin from the north and east, attempting to surround us. Then we leave to the south and west, Alara decided. She turned to Celine, clasping the older woman's forearm in the traditional greeting of their clan. We'll rendezvous at the sacred ground by dawn. Be careful. And you, young Alpha, Celine replied, returning the gesture. With a silent signal to her group, she melted into the forest, moving with the liquid grace that characterized the Crimson Shield bloodline. Alara turned to her own group, Silas, Freya, and 12 others who had answered her unconscious call. We need to draw them away from the cabin, give Celine's group time to escape. I know these woods, Freya offered. There's an old quarry about 5 miles southwest. Lots of places to disappear. Tunnels that connect to the river system. Perfect, Alara agreed. Silas, can you still shift fully? The old advisor smiled, a flash of youthful vigor animating his weathered features. I may be old, young Alpha, but I'm not dead yet. Without further discussion, the group moved into action. As they slipped into the forest, Alara heard the first shouts from the Thornwall patrol discovering the cabin. A quick glance back showed flashlight beams sweeping the clearing, illuminating the empty vehicles. They ran in silence for several minutes, the werewolves easily navigating the dark forest. Alara found herself moving with a new grace and speed, her body responding to the awakening power within. The pendant at her neck pulsed in time with her heartbeat, a constant reminder of her heritage and the responsibilities it entailed. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew, crashing through underbrush. Short commands barked between patrol members. The occasional howl as a fully shifted wolf picked up their scent. They're gaining, Freya warned, her enhanced hearing detecting what the others could not yet sense. These aren't regular patrol members. They're Thorn's elite guard. Then we make ourselves more interesting quarry, Alara decided, an idea forming. Silas, remember that river crossing trick you showed me last week? The old advisor grinned in understanding. A perfect application, but it will require precise timing. And a distraction, Freya added, already unbuckling her belt. I can lead them one way while you prepare the surprise. Alara hesitated, concerned for Alaric's sister. It's risky. If they catch you, they won't, Freya assured her, already stripping off her jacket. I've outrun my brother's best trackers since I was 16. Besides, they'll hesitate to harm the alpha's sister, even under Thorn's influence. Unable to argue with the logic, Ilara nodded. Be careful. Meet us at the quarry. With a quick salute, Freya shifted, her form blurring, contracting, and reforming into a sleek wolf with distinctive blue-tinged silver fur. She darted off to the east, deliberately making enough noise to attract attention. Alara turned to the others. The rest of you continue southwest to the quarry. Silas and I will join you after we've discouraged our pursuers. As the group divided, Alara and Silas veered west, moving swiftly toward the sound of rushing water. The forest opened onto a gorge where a river had cut through stone over millennia, creating sheer cliffs in a powerful current below. Here, Silas indicated, stopping at a narrow point where the gap could conceivably be jumped by someone with werewolf strength and speed. The old boundary marker should be just upstream. And they found it quickly in an ancient oak that had grown horizontally out over the gorge, its massive trunk forming a natural bridge across the chasm. Decades of exposure had hardened the wood to near stone density. Remember the principle, Silas instructed as they climbed out onto the trunk. The shield isn't just defensive. It can be projected, shaped, used to redirect energy. Alara nodded, positioning herself midway across the natural bridge. She could hear the patrol approaching. Freya had done her job well, leading a portion of their pursuers directly toward their position. Focus on the pendant, Silas reminded her, moving to stand behind her. Feel its connection to the elements around you. Earth, air, water, fire, all respond to the Crimson Shield's call. Closing her eyes, Alara reached for the power that had been growing within her. The pendant grew warm against her skin, then hot, its energy spreading through her body in waves of tingling sensation. She felt her awareness expand outward, sensing the ancient oak beneath her feet, the rushing water below, the approaching werewolves crashing through the underbrush. When she opened her eyes, they glowed with crimson light, reflecting the energy now coursing through her veins. She extended her hands toward the approaching sounds, visualizing what she wanted to create. The first of the patrol burst from the tree line, 4 fully shifted werewolves in their massive battle forms, followed by 3 human-form wolves carrying tranquilizer rifles. They skidded to a halt at the sight of Alara standing in the middle of the natural bridge, her eyes glowing, hands extended. "Surrender, Omega," the lead wolf called, using her former title as an insult. "Elder Thorn wants you alive, but he'll settle for dead if necessary." "I am not an Omega," Ilara replied, her voice carrying an otherworldly resonance that surprised even her. "I never was, and Thorn isn't giving the orders anymore." With a surge of will, she released the energy she'd been gathering. From her outstretched hands, crimson light erupted, forming a translucent barrier that spanned the width of the gorge. The shield pulsed with power, its surface rippling like water. The patrol leader snarled and charged, clearly expecting to break through what appeared to be merely light. Instead, he slammed into an unyielding surface with a sickening crack, rebounding to land in an ungraceful heap. 2 others fired their tranquilizer rifles. The darts penetrated the shield, but emerged on the other side transformed. Their metal components melted, their sedative contents evaporated. Useless husks fell harmlessly at Alara's feet. "You cannot pass," she stated simply, feeling the power flow through her with increasing ease. This was different from her practice sessions, stronger, more focused, as if the threat to those she protected had unlocked a deeper level of her abilities. The patrol regrouped, clearly unsettled by this unexpected development. They hadn't anticipated an Omega with powers. Their confusion gave Alara the opening she needed. "Now, Silas," she called, maintaining the shield while reaching deeper into the well of power within her. The old advisor raised his own hands, adding his considerable experience to Alara's raw power. Together, they pushed the shield forward, spanning it rapidly toward the patrol. The wolves scrambled backward, but not quickly enough. The crimson barrier engulfed them, lifting them off their feet. With a gesture from Alara, the shield tilted, dumping the entire patrol unceremoniously into the river below. The wolves' howls of outrage were cut short by splashes as they hit the swift-moving water. They weren't in danger of drowning, all werewolves were strong swimmers, but the current would carry them several miles downstream before they could reach shore, effectively removing them from pursuit. As the shield dissipated, Alara sagged slightly, the expenditure of energy taking its toll on her still developing abilities. Silas steadied her with a supportive hand. "Impressive for one not fully awakened," he commented, satisfaction evident in his tone. "Your grandmother would be proud." Alara managed a tired smile. "Let's hope the others had similar success. We should get to the quarry and meet up with Freya." They made their way carefully through the forest, alert for any signs of remaining pursuit. The quarry, when they reached it, was silent and seemingly deserted, its steep stone walls rising like sentinels in the moonlight. "Down here," came a whispered call from below. Freya's head appeared from behind a boulder, gesturing them toward a narrow crevice in the quarry wall. "Everyone's inside, quick, before the second patrol finds us." They squeezed through the opening into a surprisingly spacious cavern. The other members of their group had established a temporary camp, complete with battery-powered lanterns that cast a warm glow over the rough stone walls. "Any casualties?" Alara asked, scanning the assembled faces. "None," Freya confirmed, though Marcus took a tranquilizer dart in the shoulder. Ryder managed to extract it before the full dose was delivered. A young man with dark hair raised his hand weakly from where he sat propped against the wall. "Already wearing off. I'll be fine in an hour." Alara nodded, relieved. "What about the other patrols?" "We led them on a merry chase," a tall woman with copper-colored hair reported. "Lost them in the old logging roads to the south. By the time they regroup, Celine's party should be well on their way to the sacred ground." "Then we've succeeded," Silas declared, lowering himself carefully onto a flat rock. "But we cannot linger. By morning, Thorn will have every available wolf searching for us. And these caves connect to an underground river system," Freya explained, spreading a rough map on the ground. "It's how the quarry workers used to move stone to the processing facility downstream. The tunnels are flooded in places, but passable. They'll bring us out near the eastern edge of the neutral zone, about 10 miles from Aurora's resting place." Alara studied the map, calculating times and distances. "We could reach the sacred ground by midday tomorrow, assuming no further interference." "A significant assumption," Silas cautioned. "Thorn is not acting alone. Abraxas influences him, and through him, the entire Thornwald pack. We should expect continued pursuit, possibly even traps. All the more reason to complete the awakening ritual as quickly as possible," Ilara concluded. She turned to the assembled group, feeling the weight of leadership settling more comfortably on her shoulders. "Rest while you can. We move in 2 hours." As the others settled in to catch what sleep they could, Ilara found herself drawn to the mouth of the cavern. Standing in the narrow opening, she could see the moon through gaps in the clouds, waxing, growing fuller by the night, inexorably approaching the blood moon that would mark Abraxas's attempted breakthrough. And somewhere in the heart of Thornwall territory, Alaric was trapped in his own mind, manipulated by the very entity that had orchestrated their separation. The thought brought a complex mix of emotions: anger at the deception, grief for what had been lost, determination to free him and his pack from Abraxas's influence. "You still care for him," Freya observed quietly, appearing at her side. Alara didn't bother denying it. "The mate bond is broken, but 5 years of shared life doesn't disappear overnight." "He cares for you too," Freya said, her voice low to avoid being overheard by the others. "Even through Abraxas's influence, I've seen moments of clarity, moments when he looks toward the borders of our territory with such longing that it's painful to witness." "What Abraxas did to us can't be undone," Ilara replied, her hand moving instinctively to the pendant at her neck. "But I will free Alaric from his influence, save the pack if I can. After that—" She shrugged, leaving the thought unfinished. Freya studied her former sister-in-law with newfound respect. "You've changed, not just physically. There's a certainty to you now, a purpose. Finding out you're the heir to an ancient lineage of werewolf guardians tends to clarify things," Ilara said with a wry smile. Then more seriously, "I spent 5 years trying to be what the Thornwall pack needed. The perfect Luna, the supportive mate, the potential mother to the next alpha. Now I know that was never my destiny." "And if you had known earlier, before meeting Alaric?" The question gave Alara pause. "I don't know," she admitted finally. "Aurora kept the truth from me for a reason. Perhaps things happened exactly as they needed to." Freya nodded thoughtfully. "The prophecy. When blood of shield and blood of thorn unite, the veil shall strengthen or tear asunder. Maybe your paths were always meant to cross, just not in the way either of you expected. Maybe, Alara conceded, but prophecies have a way of being maddeningly vague until after the fact. They fell into companionable silence, keeping watch as the others rested. In the darkness of the cavern behind them, Silas observed the interaction with knowing eyes, seeing the pieces of an ancient pattern falling into place, Alpha finding her strength, gathering her circle, preparing to face the darkness as her ancestors had done for generations before her. The awakening approached, and with it, a confrontation centuries in the making. The blood moon would rise in just 4 days, and by then Alara Stone would either stand as a fully realized alpha of the Crimson Shield line, or all would fall to shadow. The sacred ground lay bathed in pre-dawn light, a circular clearing nestled within an ancient grove of oak and cedar trees. At its center stood a single monolith of red-veined stone, weathered by centuries yet still bearing the faint etchings of symbols older than any living memory. Around the stone, the earth had been shaped into concentric rings, like ripples frozen in time. Alara Stone approached the monolith with measured steps, the pendant at her neck pulsing with increasing warmth as she drew closer to her grandmother's final resting place. Behind her, Silas Grayborn and Celine Rivers flanked her like sentinels, their expressions solemn in the gathering light. The journey through the underground river system had been arduous, with flooded passages requiring them to swim through pitch-black tunnels guided only by touch and instinct. They had emerged miles from the quarry, soaked and exhausted, but safely beyond the reach of Thorn's patrols. The remainder of their trek had been swift but cautious, moving through the neutral territories where neither Thornwald nor any other pack claimed dominion. Now, with the sacred ground finally reached, a palpable tension hung in the air. This place had once been the heart of Crimson Shield territory, a focal point of power for generations of female alphas who had stood guard against incursions from the Shadow Realm. Aurora's remains lie beneath the monolith, Silas explained, his voice hushed with reverence. By tradition, the alphas of the Crimson Shield clan are interred here, their bodies becoming one with the land they protected in life. Celine nodded in agreement. The ritual must be performed at the exact moment of sunrise. The threshold between night and day mirrors the threshold between potential and manifestation. As the others formed a protective circle around the clearing's edge, Reyna approached with a small wooden box carved with intricate symbols. "Everything is prepared," she said, opening the lid to reveal its contents. A silver dagger with a crimson stone set in its hilt, a small earthenware bowl, and a vial of clear liquid that seemed to capture and refract the growing light. "Water from the ancient spring that once sustained the first Crimson Shield wolves," Celine explained, seeing Alara's questioning look. "Passed down through generations, used only for the most sacred rituals." Alara took the box with steady hands, the weight of tradition and expectation settling around her shoulders like a familiar cloak. 3 weeks ago, she had been an Omega, divorced and discarded. Now she stood on the precipice of assuming a mantle worn by her ancestors for centuries. The transformation should have felt foreign, overwhelming. Instead, it resonated with a truth she had always known somewhere deep within herself. "It's time," Silas announced, as the first direct rays of sunlight pierced the eastern tree line, striking the monolith and bathing it in golden light. "The ritual has 3 phases: connection, awakening, and manifestation. You must complete all 3 before the sun fully clears the horizon." With a deep breath to center herself, Alara knelt before the monolith. Following Celine's murmured instructions, she removed the pendant from around her neck and placed it on the flat surface of the stone. Next, she took the ritual dagger and without hesitation drew its edge across her palm. Blood welled from the cut, bright crimson in the morning light. "Blood of my blood," she intoned, the words coming to her as if from memory, though she had never spoken them before. "Flesh of my flesh, I am daughter of your line, heir to your legacy." She allowed her blood to drip onto the pendant, watching as the crimson stone seemed to absorb it, growing brighter with each drop. The wound on her palm closed almost immediately, another sign of her accelerated healing abilities. "Now the earth," Celine prompted. Alara scooped a handful of soil from the base of the monolith, adding it to the bowl. She mixed it with water from the sacred spring, creating a thick paste that she spread in a circle around the pendant. The mixture began to glow faintly, responding to the power building within the stone. The final phase requires complete surrender, Silas warned. You must open yourself entirely to the legacy of your bloodline. Every memory, every power, every responsibility. It can be overwhelming. Alara met his concerned gaze with steady resolve. I'm ready. Placing both hands on the monolith, she closed her eyes and reached for the power that had been growing within her since the night of her divorce. It responded eagerly, rushing to the surface like a river breaking through a dam. The pendant's glow intensified, bathing the clearing in crimson light. Images flooded her mind. Generations of women with her same amber eyes standing guard against shadowy figures, wielding shields of crimson energy. She saw battles won and lost, treaties made and broken, children born and raised to continue the sacred duty. And through it all, a constant vigilance against the darkness that sought to breach the veil. The memories came faster, more intense. Her grandmother Aurora, young and fierce, driving back a shadow entity with a blazing shield of energy. Her mother, whom she barely remembered, performing a ritual to strengthen the veil during a solar eclipse. And finally, herself as an infant, Aurora placing the pendant around her tiny neck, whispering words of protection and concealment. Power surged through her body, no longer tentative or partial, but full and complete. Her awareness expanded beyond the physical, sensing the ley lines of energy that crisscrossed beneath the sacred ground, the pulse of life in every plant and creature for miles around, the faint shimmering of the veil itself in certain places where it had grown thin. With a gasp, Alara opened her eyes. The world looked different, sharper, more vibrant, layers of energy visible where before she had seen only physical forms. The pendant had transformed, its simple leather cord now a delicate chain of interwoven silver and gold, the stone itself larger and more intricate, pulsing with a steady inner light. It is done, Celine breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. The awakening is complete. Alara rose to her feet, feeling a new strength flowing through her limbs. The pendant, now a true amulet of power, returned to its place around her neck of its own accord, settling against her skin with a sensation of homecoming. Silas approached slowly, his weathered face alight with a mixture of pride and awe. How do you feel, Alpha? The title no longer felt presumptuous or borrowed. It was simply truth. Complete, Alara replied, her voice carrying a subtle resonance that hadn't been there before, as if I've finally found a part of myself that was always missing. Around the clearing, the gathered Crimson Shield descendants knelt in a gesture of respect and acceptance. Even Freya, with no blood connection to the clan, found herself bowing her head in recognition of the power that now radiated from Alara. The moment of reverence was broken by a low whistle from one of their sentries positioned at the forest's edge. Movement to the north, the young woman reported, her enhanced senses detecting what humans would have missed entirely. Multiple signatures, approaching fast. Alara reached out with her newly enhanced senses, scanning the forest beyond their protective circle. Thornwalled wolves, she confirmed, detecting their distinct energy patterns. At least 20, moving in formation. And something else. She frowned, focusing on a strange distortion that accompanied the approaching patrol. Shadow essence. One of them carries Abraxas's influence more strongly than the others. Thorn, Freya guessed grimly. He rarely leaves the pack house anymore. But for this, he would want to lead the hunt himself, Silas agreed, especially if Abraxas sensed the awakening ritual. Alara considered their options quickly. Her new abilities gave them advantages they hadn't possessed before, but engaging in direct conflict with the Thornwalled wolves wasn't the goal. Too many of them were acting under Abraxas's influence rather than their own free will. We split up, she decided, her leadership instincts crystallizing into certainty. Celine, take half our people and circle west, back toward the neutral territories. Create a diversion, but avoid direct confrontation if possible. The older woman nodded, immediately gathering her assigned group with silent efficiency. Freya, you know your brother's pack better than anyone. Take 4 of our fastest runners and lead another group east. Make sure you're seen, but stay just beyond their reach. And you? Freya asked, though she already suspected the answer from the determined set of Alara's jaw. Silas, Reyna, and I will head directly south toward the ancient oak where Alaric left his message. Alara touched the pendant at her neck, feeling its steady pulse of energy. With the awakening complete, I can finally discover what he hid there. Reyna looked concerned. That puts us on a direct path back to Thornwald territory. Exactly where they won't expect us to go, Alara confirmed with a grim smile. Besides, we have advantages now that we didn't have before. As if to demonstrate, she extended her hand, palm up. Crimson energy spiraled upward, coalescing into a small, perfect shield that hovered above her fingers. With a thought, she expanded it, creating a dome that enveloped all three of them before dissolving it back into ambient energy. Silas nodded appreciatively. The full power of the Crimson Shield awakened at last. The group separated with practiced efficiency, each taking a different route from the sacred ground. As Alara led her small team southward, she extended her senses behind them, monitoring the Thornwall patrol's movements. As expected, they split to pursue Celine and Freya's groups, the more obvious threats drawing attention away from Alara's stealthier approach. They traveled swiftly through the forest, Alara's enhanced abilities allowing her to detect and avoid potential dangers long before they became immediate threats. By midday, they had covered substantial ground, the landscape gradually shifting from the dense, old-growth forest of the neutral territories to the more managed woodlands that marked the approach to Thornwall land. "We're close to the border," Reyna observed as they paused to rest beside a small stream. "Another hour's journey at most." Silas studied Alara with keen eyes. "Your abilities continue to develop. How are you adapting?" Alara considered the question, taking inventory of the changes that had occurred since the awakening ritual. "It's like having an entirely new set of senses," she admitted. "I can feel the energy flowing through everything, plants, animals, the earth itself, and the veil." She gestured toward the horizon where a faint distortion was visible to her newly enhanced perception. "I can see where it is strong and where it's thin, like fabric worn in certain places." "A critical ability for what lies ahead," Silas noted. "The blood moon is 3 days away. When it rises, the veil will be at its thinnest point, vulnerable to Abraxas's ritual. All the more reason to find whatever Alaric hid beneath the ancient oak," Alara said, rising to continue their journey. "He used the clarity serum to break free of Abraxas's influence long enough to leave that message. It must be important." They resumed their trek, moving with increased caution as they approached Thornwall territory. The ancient oak that marked the border stood alone in a small clearing, its massive trunk and sprawling branches visible from a considerable distance. As they drew closer, Alara felt a strange resonance from the pendant, a pull toward the tree that confirmed they were on the right path. "Wait," she commanded suddenly, throwing out an arm to halt her companions. Her enhanced senses had detected something ahead, a subtle distortion in the ambient energy patterns. "There's a trap," Reyna tensed, scanning the seemingly empty forest ahead. "I don't see anything." "It's not physical," Alara explained, focusing her perception on the anomaly. "It's a sensor spell, primitive but effective. If we cross that line, it will alert someone to our presence." Silas frowned. Thorn shouldn't have access to such magic. The Thornwall pack has always relied on physical strength rather than mystical abilities. "Abraxas," Alara concluded grimly. "He's providing enhancements through his connection to the Shadow Realm." She studied the energy pattern carefully, looking for weaknesses in its construction. "I can create a temporary gap, but we'll need to move quickly. Once we're through, I'll have to close it before the spell detects the manipulation." Concentrating on the pendant's power, Alara extended her hand toward the invisible barrier. Crimson energy flowed from her fingertips, seeking the weakest point in the sensor spell's matrix. Finding it, she carefully began to separate the energy strands, creating an opening just large enough for them to pass through. "Now," she whispered, maintaining her focus as Silas and Reyna slipped through the gap. Following them, she quickly resealed the barrier behind her, leaving no trace of their passage. "Impressive," Silas murmured as they continued toward the ancient oak. "Your grandmother would be proud." The ancient oak loomed before them, its trunk wider than 3 people standing with arms outstretched. Roots as thick as a person's waist breached the soil before plunging back into the earth, creating natural archways and hollows at the base of the tree. "This is where Alaric and I first met," Alara explained, approaching the massive trunk. "During the territorial disputes, my military unit was tracking reports of rogue wolves. We found him here." wounded after an ambush by a rival pack. Instead of completing our mission to capture any werewolf we encountered, I helped him. The beginning of your journey together, Reyna observed, and perhaps now, a new beginning. Alara knelt beside the largest of the root formations, where a natural hollow had formed in the trunk. Beneath the roots of the ancient oak, where we first met, she recited from Alaric's message. It has to be here somewhere. Placing her hand on the gnarled wood, she closed her eyes and extended her senses into the tree itself. The oak responded to her touch, its ancient energy intertwining with hers. Through this connection, she detected something nestled deep within the root system, a concentration of energy different from the natural patterns of the tree. There, she said, opening her eyes and pointing to a spot where two massive roots converged. Something's buried there. Reyna produced a small, folding shovel from her pack, and they took turns carefully excavating the spot Alara had indicated. After removing about 2 feet of soil, the shovel struck something solid with a dull thunk. Found it, Reyna announced, brushing away the remaining dirt to reveal a small metal box, its surface etched with familiar symbols, the same ancient markings that had adorned the monolith at the sacred ground. That's a Crimson Shield clan lockbox, Silas observed, his brow furrowing in confusion. But how would Alaric have access to such an artifact? Alara lifted the box carefully, feeling a resonance between it and her pendant. My grandmother, she realized. She must have given it to him at some point. But why? The box had no visible lock or latch, only a small indentation in the center of its lid. Acting on instinct, Alara pressed her pendant into the depression. It fit perfectly, and with a soft click, the box opened. Inside lay 3 items. A folded piece of parchment covered in Aurora Stone's distinctive handwriting, a small vial containing what appeared to be blood, and a braided cord made of silver, gold, and black threads. A binding cord, Silas identified the braided object with surprise, used in ancient mate bond ceremonies before the modern ritual was established. They've become extremely rare. Alara unfolded the parchment with careful fingers, recognizing her grandmother's handwriting immediately. To my granddaughter in the Thornwald Alpha, if you are reading this, the time of prophecy is upon us. The shadow stirs, seeking entrance through the blood moon gate. What was severed must be reforged, not as it was, but as it was always meant to be. The binding cord contains strands from both your bloodlines, woven with shadow thread to create a bridge between realms. The vial holds my blood, freely given, to activate the ancient magic. When Alpha of Shield and Alpha of Thorn stand united by choice rather than compulsion, a new bond will form, stronger than mate, deeper than pack. This bond alone can mend the veil where Abraxas seeks to tear it asunder. The choice must be freely made by both. No coercion, no obligation, power balanced, respect mutual. May the wisdom of your ancestors guide you both, Aurora Stone, last guardian of the Eastern Veil. Alara read the letter twice, her mind racing to process its implications. She knew, she whispered, looking up at Silas. All this time, she knew what would happen. The old advisor nodded slowly. Aurora always had the gift of foresight, stronger than any alpha before her. She must have seen this moment coming decades ago. But why allow the mate bond in the first place if she knew it would be broken? Reyna asked, confusion evident in her voice. Because the breaking was necessary, Alara realized, the pieces falling into place. The traditional mate bond wouldn't have been strong enough to stand against Abraxas. It had to be broken so that something new could be formed, a conscious choice rather than an instinctual connection. What was severed may yet shield, Silas quoted from Alaric's message. He understood, at least partially, during his moment of clarity. Alara carefully returned the items to the box, securing it in her bag. We need to reach Alaric before the blood moon, convince him to break free of Abraxas's influence long enough to complete this new bond. Getting to him won't be easy, Reyna cautioned. The pack house will be heavily guarded, especially with the ritual approaching, and Alaric himself will be closely watched by Lilith and Thorn. We have one advantage they don't expect, Alara said, touching the pendant at her neck. My full powers have awakened, and with them, the ability to detect and counter shadow influence. A sudden rustling in the underbrush interrupted their discussion. Alara spun toward the sound, crimson energy already gathering at her fingertips. But instead of thorn-walled wolves or shadow creatures, a lone figure emerged from the forest. A man in his early 50s with silver-streaked dark hair and the bearing of a warrior despite his current haggard appearance. Nathaniel, Raina gasped, recognizing the Thornwall Pack's former head of security. "We thought you were dead." The man approached cautiously, his clothes torn, his face gaunt with exhaustion. "Nearly was. Thorn ordered my execution when I questioned Lilith's influence over the Alpha. I escaped, but they've been hunting me for weeks." Alara studied him with her enhanced senses, detecting no shadow taint in his energy signature. "You're clear of Abraxas's influence," she confirmed. "How have you managed to avoid it when so many others have fallen under his control?" Nathaniel tapped a small silver pendant hanging around his neck. "Your grandmother gave this to me years ago when I first joined Alaric's security team. Said it would keep my thoughts my own if dark times ever came." He looked at Alara with newfound understanding. She was preparing for this all along, wasn't she? "So it seems," Alara agreed. "What can you tell us about the current situation at the pack house?" Nathaniel's expression darkened. "It's bad. The blood moon ritual preparations are nearly complete. Thorn has converted the central chamber into some kind of portal site with Lilith at its center. The pregnancy has accelerated. She looks ready to deliver at any moment, though it's been less than 4 months since conception." "And Alaric?" Alara asked, the concern in her voice impossible to disguise. "Kept in a drugged state most of the time. They only allow him moments of lucidity for pack business that requires his approval." Nathaniel's gaze softened with sympathy. "He fights it, though. Even through the drugs and the shadow influence, he fights. I've heard him call your name in his sleep." The revelation sent an unexpected pang through Alara's chest. Despite everything that had happened, despite the broken mate bond, some part of Alaric was still struggling to break free. "We need to get to him," she said decisively. "Nathaniel, can you get us into the pack house undetected?" The security chief considered the question carefully. "There's an old emergency tunnel built during the territorial wars. It leads from the river's edge directly to the Alpha's private quarters. Few know about it. It was considered outdated once modern security systems were installed." "But you know about it," Silas observed. Nathaniel nodded. "Part of my job was knowing every possible entry and exit point. Thorn may have forgotten about it, especially with his attention focused on the ritual preparations." "When is the ritual scheduled to begin?" Alara asked, her mind already formulating a plan. "Midnight on the blood moon, 2 nights from now." Nathaniel hesitated, then added, "There's something else you should know. The child, it's not developing normally. I've glimpsed it during the medical exams Thorn insists upon. Its form shifts constantly, never quite solid. And its eyes," he shuddered at the memory, "black, entirely black." "The shadow essence is dominant," Silas explained grimly. "As the blood moon approaches, the child becomes more vessel than offspring, a gateway between realms rather than a true being." "Can it be saved?" Raina asked, her healer's instincts rising to the surface. Alara exchanged a glance with Silas, seeing the uncertainty in his ancient eyes. "I don't know," she admitted, "but our first priority must be stopping the ritual and sealing the veil. Everything else comes second to preventing Abraxas's breakthrough." Nathaniel straightened, determination overcoming his exhaustion. "I'll help you reach Alaric. After that," he gestured to the pendant at Alara's neck, "I suspect you'll know what needs to be done better than any of us." As they prepared to move deeper into Thornwall territory, Alara sent a silent call through her awakened bond with the Crimson Shield clan members. Unlike a direct communication, this was more like a ripple through shared consciousness, alerting Celine, Freya, and the others to their progress in the discovery of Aurora's legacy. The response came swiftly, a sense of acknowledgement and rallying forces. The scattered members of the clan were converging, preparing for the confrontation that would determine the fate of the Veil and both realms it separated. With Nathaniel guiding them, they traveled through lesser-known paths in Thornwall territory, avoiding patrols and sensor spells with the aid of Alara's enhanced abilities. By nightfall, they had reached the riverbank a mile downstream from the pack house, where they established a temporary camp hidden within a dense thicket. "The tunnel entrance is just ahead," Nathaniel explained as they shared a sparse meal. "Disguised as a drainage outlet. Once inside, we'll need to move quickly. The passage hasn't been maintained in years. Parts may have collapsed or flooded. How long to reach the Alpha's quarters? Alara asked, studying the rough map he'd drawn in the dirt. 30 minutes if the tunnel is clear. Potentially longer if we encounter obstacles. He looked at her with frank assessment. You've changed since you left the pack. The power you carry now, I've never seen anything like it. The awakening ritual completed her transformation, Silas explained. She now carries the full abilities of the Crimson Shield line, abilities that have lain dormant for generations. Nathaniel nodded thoughtfully. It suits you. You always seemed constrained as Luna, as if you were holding something back. I was, Lara acknowledged, though I didn't understand it myself at the time. She touched the pendant at her neck, feeling its steady pulse of energy. But now the path forward is clear. As the others prepared for rest before their infiltration attempt, Alara moved a short distance away, seeking a moment of solitude. Standing at the river's edge, she gazed toward the distant lights of the pack house, barely visible through the trees. The flow of water at her feet reminded her of time's inexorable passage, from the night of her divorce beneath the blood moon to this moment, preparing to confront the entity that had manipulated them all. In a few short weeks, her entire understanding of herself and her place in the world had transformed. The path that once seemed closed to her, leadership, purpose, power, now stretched before her, challenging and clear. Silas approached quietly, his weathered face thoughtful in the moonlight, contemplating what lies ahead. And behind, Alara admitted, everything that's happened, the divorce, the awakening, discovering my heritage, it all seems to have been leading to the blood moon ritual, as if our paths were set long before we understood the journey. Destiny and choice are not mutually exclusive, Silas observed. Your grandmother saw possibilities, prepared for them, but the decisions remained yours, and Alaric's. Alara turned to face him fully. Do you think it will work? This new bond, Aurora described. If both parties enter it willingly, with full understanding of what it means? Silas considered the question carefully. Such a bond would be unprecedented in recent history, but the ancient texts speak of similar alliances between powerful bloodlines. Not a mate bond as we understand it today, but a partnership of equals, each bringing their unique strengths to create something greater than either could achieve alone. And if Alaric is too far under Abraxas's influence, if he can't break free long enough to make that choice, the old advisor's expression grew solemn. Then we must be prepared to stop the ritual by other means, even if those means are difficult. Alara nodded, understanding the unspoken implication. If Alaric couldn't be reached, if the new bond couldn't be formed, then stopping Abraxas might require more drastic measures, measures that could harm those currently under his influence, including Alaric himself. Get some rest, Silas advised gently. Tomorrow will test us all. Dawn brought mist rising from the river, providing additional cover as they approached the tunnel entrance. Nathaniel led the way, pushing aside overgrown vegetation to reveal a rusted metal grate partially submerged in the water. The lock broke years ago, he explained, pulling the grate open with a screech of protesting metal. But the noise works in our favor. Sounds like this are common near the water treatment system. No one will think twice about it. They entered in single file, Alara creating a small orb of crimson light to illuminate the dank passage. The tunnel was roughly 8 feet high at its entrance, its walls lined with old brick that glistened with moisture. As they progressed, the ceiling gradually lowered, forcing them to duck in places where support beams had sagged over time. The tunnel was built during the early days of the territorial wars, Nathaniel explained as they navigated a particularly narrow section. An escape route for the Alpha family if the pack house was ever overrun. Alaric mentioned it once, Alara recalled, but I thought it had been sealed during the renovations 5 years ago. Officially, yes. Nathaniel's expression held a hint of pride. I advised against it. Always good to have an exit that doesn't appear on any official plans. They continued in silence for several minutes. The only sounds their quiet footsteps and the occasional drip of water from the ceiling. Alara extended her senses ahead, scanning for potential threats or signs of recent use. The tunnel appeared undisturbed, confirming Nathaniel's belief that it had been forgotten by most of the pack. After approximately 20 minutes of careful progress, they reached a junction where the main tunnel branched in three directions. The left passage leads to the old wine cellar, Nathaniel indicated. The right to the former armory, now a storage room. Straight ahead continues to a ladder that accesses the Alpha's private study through a hidden panel in the floor. Is the study likely to be occupied? Raina asked, her voice barely above a whisper, despite being far from any potential listeners. Not at this hour, Nathaniel replied. Morning council meetings are held in the main hall. Alaric would normally be there with Thorn and the other elders. And Lilith? Alara questioned. Confined to the ritual chamber for the past week. Thorn claims it's for her protection as the pregnancy reaches its final stage. They chose the central passage, moving with increased caution as they approached the heart of the pack house. The tunnel gradually inclined upward, the brick giving way to more finished stonework that marked the foundation of the main building. Finally, they reached a rusty metal ladder bolted to the wall, extending upward into darkness. Nathaniel went first, climbing slowly to minimize noise. At the top, he paused to listen before carefully sliding aside a concealed panel. After confirming the room was empty, he signaled for the others to follow. One by one, they emerged into Alaric's private study, a wood-paneled room lined with bookshelves and dominated by a massive oak desk. The space was exactly as Alara remembered it, down to the framed map of Thornwald territory on the wall and the worn leather chair where Alaric had spent countless hours handling pack business. Nothing's changed, she murmured, a wave of nostalgia washing over her. This room had been a sanctuary for both of them during the challenging early years of Alaric's leadership. No visible changes, Silas corrected quietly, his senses nearly as acute as Alara's. But feel the energy. Shadow essence has permeated this space. Alara extended her awareness, detecting the subtle wrongness Silas had identified. It felt like a thin film overlaying the room's natural energy, not immediately obvious, but unmistakable once noticed. Abraxas's influence had seeped into every corner of the pack house, gradually altering the very fabric of the place. Where would Alaric be now? She asked Nathaniel, forcing herself to focus on their mission. The morning council should be finishing soon. He typically returns here afterward to handle correspondence before lunch. Nathaniel moved to the door, listening carefully for movement in the hallway beyond. We should secure the room and wait. It's our best chance to speak with him privately. Alara nodded in agreement. Raina, watch the tunnel entrance. Silas, help me prepare a containment circle. When Alaric arrives, we'll need to shield him from Abraxas's influence long enough to explain everything. Working with practiced efficiency, they rearranged the furniture to create an open space in the center of the study. Using chalk from her pack, Alara drew a complex pattern on the wooden floor, a series of interlocking circles and symbols designed to block external energies while containing those within. Will this work against a being as powerful as Abraxas? Raina asked, watching the process with interest. Temporarily, Silas replied. Long enough, I hope, for Alara to reach whatever remains of the true Alaric beneath the shadow influence. As they completed their preparations, Nathaniel tensed at his position by the door. Someone's coming, he whispered. Multiple footsteps. Alara motioned for everyone to take their planned positions, Raina and Silas concealing themselves behind the heavy drapes flanking the windows, Nathaniel behind the door, ready to intercept anyone who might accompany Alaric. The footsteps stopped outside the study. A key turned in the lock, and the door swung open to reveal Alaric Thornwald. He entered alone, closing the door behind him with a weary sigh that spoke volumes about his current state. The sight of him sent a complex rush of emotions through Alara. He looked physically similar to when she'd last seen him at the divorce ritual, but there were subtle differences that her enhanced perception detected immediately. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his movements lacked their usual fluid grace, as if he were perpetually fighting against his own body. Most telling was the faint shadow essence that clung to him like a second skin, particularly concentrated around his head and heart. He was halfway to his desk before he sensed her presence. Freezing in place, he slowly raised his head, silver eyes widening in shock as they met her amber gaze. Alara. His voice was rough, disbelieving. Why are you here? She stepped forward into the light, allowing him to see her fully. The changes in her stance, the confidence in her bearing, the pendant at her neck pulsing with crimson energy. "We need to talk, Alaric," she said simply. "About Lilith, about the child, about what's really happening to your pack." Confusion flickered across his features, quickly replaced by a flash of anger that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You were banished from Thornwald territory. If Thorn finds you here, Thorn is under Abraxas's influence," she interrupted calmly. "As are you." At the mention of the shadow entity's name, Alaric flinched visibly, one hand rising to his temple as if in sudden pain. "I don't know what you're talking about. You need to leave before—" "Before what, Alaric?" Alara took another step toward him, stopping just outside the containment circle they had prepared. "Before you're forced to call the guards, before whatever is controlling you makes you do something you'll regret." Nathaniel emerged from his hiding place, moving to stand beside Alara. "She speaks the truth, Alpha. The pack is being manipulated. Has been for months. Lilith isn't what she appears to be." Alaric stared at his former security chief with growing confusion. "Nathaniel, you're supposed to be dead. Thorn said you tried to assassinate Lilith." "Another lie," Nathaniel replied evenly. "I discovered the truth about her, about the ritual being prepared for the blood moon. Thorn ordered my execution to silence me." Alaric's breathing had become labored, his internal struggle visible in the tension of his body. The shadow essence surrounding him seemed to pulse and writhe, responding to his emotional turmoil. "The blood moon," he repeated, his voice strained. "2 nights from now. I need to be there for—" He frowned, unable to complete the thought. "For what, Alaric?" Alara pressed gently. "Do you even know why the ritual is happening? What it's meant to accomplish?" He shook his head, confusion deepening the lines of his face. "For the child, for the future of the pack. Thorn says it's necessary to ensure the proper transition of power." "That's not you speaking," Alara said. "That's Abraxas, using your voice, your body, to further his plans." At the shadow entity's name, Alaric doubled over with a groan of pain. The shadow essence around him darkened, becoming more opaque as it fought to maintain control. Recognizing the critical moment, Alara acted decisively. "Now," she commanded. Silas and Reyna emerged from their hiding places, moving to strategic positions around the containment circle. Alara reached for her pendant, channeling its power through her fingertips as she had practiced countless times over the past weeks. Crimson energy flared outward, surrounding Alaric in a dome of translucent light. He straightened in alarm, attempting to back away, only to find himself confined by the circular boundary. "What are you doing?" he demanded, panic edging his voice. "Release me immediately." "This isn't to harm you," Alara explained, maintaining the energy shield with steady concentration. "It's to help you see clearly, even if only for a few minutes." Silas stepped forward, producing a small vial similar to the clarity serum Alaric had used weeks earlier. "This is stronger than what you took before," he explained, "formulated specifically to combat shadow influence." Alaric's eyes darted between them, the internal battle evident in his fluctuating expressions. One moment he appeared furious, the next confused and vulnerable. "I don't need your help," he insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. "Lilith is carrying my child. The ritual will secure our future." "Lilith is not what she seems," Alara countered, "and the child she carries is not entirely yours. Look deep within yourself, Alaric. Part of you knows something is wrong. Part of you has been fighting it all along." She nodded to Silas, who carefully placed the vial on the floor within the containment circle. "The choice is yours," she told Alaric. "Take it or not. We won't force you. But know that in 2 nights, during the blood moon ritual, Abraxas plans to use your child as a gateway to tear open the veil between worlds. Everything you've built, everyone you care about, will be consumed by shadow." Alaric stared at the vial, conflict raging across his features. The shadow essence around him seemed to thicken, attempting to prevent him from reaching for the serum. With visible effort, he fought against the invisible restraint, extending a trembling hand toward the floor. "That's it," Alara encouraged softly. "Fight it, Alaric. You're stronger than his influence." With a final surge of will, Alaric grasped the vial and uncorked it. Before the shadow essence could reassert control, he swallowed the contents in a single gulp. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The shadow substance surrounding him recoiled as if burned, shrinking away from his skin in writhing tendrils. Alaric himself convulsed once, then dropped to his knees, gasping for breath as the serum coursed through his system. For several tense seconds, no one moved. Then slowly Alaric raised his head. His eyes, when they met Alara's, were clear for the first time in months. The silver irises bright with recognition and an awareness that had been missing during their previous encounter. "Alara," he breathed, his voice his own again. "I remember now. All of it. What I've done, what I've allowed to happen." His expression crumpled with horror and regret. "God, what have I done to you? To us?" "It wasn't you," she assured him, maintaining the containment shawl even as her heart ached at his obvious pain. "Abraxas has been manipulating events from the beginning, using Thorn, using Lilith, using you to further his plans." Alaric struggled to his feet, his movements steadier as the serum took full effect. "Lilith, she was never—" He shook his head, struggling to articulate the realization. "She appeared out of nowhere just when the pressure from the elders about an heir was at its peak. Everything about her seemed perfect. Too perfect. She's a vessel," Silas explained, "created by Abraxas to serve as his anchor in this world. The pregnancy, the child, all part of his plan to breach the veil during the blood moon." Understanding dawned in Alaric's eyes. "The ritual Thorn has been preparing for weeks, converting the central chamber, gathering specific herbs and artifacts." His expression hardened with sudden determination. "We need to stop it." "We will," Alara promised. "But first, there's something you need to see." She reached into her pack, removing the metal box they had recovered from beneath the ancient oak. "You left a message for me leading to this. Do you remember?" Alaric nodded slowly. "Vaguely. After using your clarity serum, I had a moment of lucidity. I remembered Aurora giving me the box years ago, making me swear to keep it hidden until the time was right." His gaze fell on the binding cord visible within. "She said it would be needed when shadows threatened to divide what should be united." "She foresaw all of this," Alara confirmed. "The divorce, the awakening of my true nature. Abraxas's attempt to breach the veil." She extended the box toward him. "She also foresaw a potential solution, a new kind of bond between our bloodlines, freely chosen rather than compelled by instinct or tradition." Alaric studied the items in the box, his expression thoughtful. "Not a mate bond. Something older, more fundamental," Silas elaborated. "A bond of alliance and shared purpose rather than mating and reproduction. In ancient times, such bonds were common between powerful bloodlines, creating partnerships that transcended individual relationships." "And you believe this could help stop Abraxas?" Alaric asked, his gaze returning to Alara with new intensity. "Aurora believed it could repair the veil where Abraxas seeks to tear it." Alara touched the pendant at her neck, which seemed to pulse more strongly in Alaric's presence. "But it requires full consent from both of us. A conscious choice made with complete understanding of what it means." Nathaniel cleared his throat, drawing their attention to more practical concerns. "The serum won't last forever. An hour at most. We need to decide quickly what happens next." Alaric straightened, some of his natural authority reasserting itself, now that he was temporarily free of Abraxas's influence. "I can't leave the pack house without arousing suspicion. Thorn watches my every move. But I can work from within, gathering information, perhaps even finding allies among those less affected by the shadow influence." "It's risky," Reyna cautioned. "Once the serum wears off, you'll be vulnerable to Abraxas's control again." "Not entirely," Alara interjected. "Not now that I understand how his influence works." She approached the edge of the containment circle, her hand raised toward Alaric. "With your permission, I can place a shield around your core self, not strong enough to break his control completely, but enough to give you moments of clarity, enough to maintain your true self beneath the surface." Alaric considered the offer, then nodded his agreement. "Do it." Alara dissolved the containment circle, stepping forward to place her palm against Alaric's chest, directly over his heart. Crimson energy flowed from her fingers, seeping beneath his skin to create a protective barrier around his essential self. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it would give him a fighting chance against Abraxas's renewed control once the serum faded. As her hand rested against him, their gazes locked in a moment of perfect understanding. So much had changed between them. The mate bond broken, new powers awakened, true natures revealed. Yet something fundamental remained, a connection that transcended the artificial bond that had once united them. The blood moon rises tomorrow night, Alara said softly. We'll be ready. My people are gathering as we speak, preparing to prevent the ritual. And after? Alaric asked, the question encompassing far more than just the immediate aftermath of the coming confrontation. Alara smiled, a genuine expression that reached her now flecked crimson eyes. After we rebuild, not what was, but what could be. It wasn't a promise of reconciliation or reunion, but something perhaps more valuable, a commitment to possibility, to choices freely made once the shadow lifted from them all. As they finalized their plans for the blood moon confrontation, the pendant at Alara's neck pulsed with steady crimson light, a beacon of awakened power, a symbol of heritage reclaimed, and a promise of protection against the darkness gathering on the horizon.